In this episode, we discuss the use of debunked claims about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio eating pets by the Trump campaign for political gain and to deceive Americans or their constituencies or whatnot. And later on, we'll consider whether the growth of OnlyFans into one of the most popular and profitable websites on the internet should be considered a surprise or is something that is totally expected. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and joining me today is a man who may not be the ice cream man, but he is known to bring some sweet taste. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, you ready to break him off something today?
Yep, let's go.
All right. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you subscribe, hit like on the show or on YouTube or your podcast platform. Doing so really helps the show out. Now, recording on September 17th, 2024, and at a recent presidential debate, we all saw former President Trump throw out the claim that Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio were eating people's pets. And this claim, which originated, and as far as we know, and really started propagating in right-wing media ecosystems, has never been supported with any evidence, and in fact has been debunked repeatedly by city officials and law enforcement and so forth in the area, that there's just no evidence of any of these claims, or that these claims even haven't come to them. But despite that, the Trump campaign has continued to push it. And at times even seem to be willing to admit that the story is not true. And that it's just, this is being used, that the story is basically out there, they're using it, but may not be true. So Tunde, what stands out to you about the Trump's campaign ongoing use of debunked claims or claims that there's no evidence to support about Haitian immigrants in Springfield to try to score political points?
Man, good question. A lot stands out. I would say starting with the fact that it's interesting. I'm 46. The first time in my lifetime I've seen a U.S. Presidential candidate and his vice president really go in this direction of things I only learned either happened in history before I was born or that I heard of, from family members that are older, in terms of the way that some leaders, their rhetoric, is really about just dividing and conquering and not about actually, political policy issues. And that's kind of what it got me feeling, is that this is what you do when you got nothing else. Part of it to me is obviously people like JD Vance have a certain worldview and agenda we've learned, and this has become jokes about things like the cat ladies or the fact he proposed having a separate, tax structure for people without children than people with children. And, I think what we're realizing here is these guys, at least Vance and Trump, I don't think they believe that if they were transparent about what they're really about on their policy, that they would win through the democratic process, that the majority of Americans would support their vision of what they think the country should be. And so this is a good way to distract an electorate, especially after you had a terrible debate a week ago. We're recording this show a week after the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And for a week now, we've been talking about Haitian migrants eating pets and all these other things that kind of distract us. So to me, I look at it as a strategy and as disgusting. I mean, it's terrible. And so
let me push back on you a little bit, because I don't know that what you're saying is true, in the sense that I don't know that this is what you would do necessarily because, or if you think you have nothing else. You may just decide that policy discussions or whatever kind of things you want to do is less engaging than throwing out claims that inflame people emotionally, make them angry, make them fearful, and so forth like that. So it may not be that they have nothing else, so to speak. It may just be that they don't want to engage people intellectually. Now, there may be a mix of both, but just react. I want to get into this, I have some comments as well, but I just want to throw that at you. And just so,
that's a great point.
What do you think about
James,
that?
That's a great point, because if I were to think, well, which one would be better? Is that a politician is actively trying to distract me and the rest of the population because they don't want us to really focus on what their main policy agendas are, or
That
do
says
I
something
have
about them.
correct?
You know what I'm saying?
And
That
that's
says
what I'm
something
saying.
about the politician. Yeah.
And that's why I'm asking this rhetorical question. Would I prefer to have that in leadership, or would I prefer to have someone that consciously is like, nah, I'm just not trying to even go there about policy and govern. I just want to divide everybody because that's
Because
just
the
who I am.
people, the people's attention span, that says something about the electorate. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like if it's like, oh, hey, I don't have any agenda, so let me just try to distract the public. That says something about the, kind of like that politician.
Well, it's
more
kind of
so.
sad as you say
And it
that.
says something, but it says something about the people. If it's like, hey, the people don't want all that stuff, or the people won't be that interested in that stuff, or they won't pay, they won't stick around. They'll be watching stuff on YouTube if I don't fire them up, make them mad, make them fearful, and all that. That's the only way that they'll pay attention to me, so to speak. That's I don't know what you would prefer.
No, but I think it's a sad reality because I guess the way I was setting that up, that rhetorical question was both are bad options, right? Like I wouldn't want to live under the leadership of either type of mindset because one is just going to then, obviously you can't trust one and the other is clearly got a strategy that is not going to be fun to live under. But
I'll say this. I mean, I think we can say objectively that both are inconsistent with the ethos of the way the country was set up. Like the founding fathers went through a lot of effort to try to take the emotion out of the politics, and then also to put in checks and balances so that leadership, and to protect a free press, so that leadership couldn't use outright deception to control the people. So either way, like you say, both of them are bad. I'd say either way, both of them are un-American, at least in the terms of the way the founding fathers set up the country. To me, what stands out is I think this is like the most clear demonstration that this Trump thing is really just about the accumulation of power. And I say that because if you say, okay, well, if JD Vance is on CNN saying, oh, well, whether this is true or not isn't really that important, or, paraphrasing him, but, basically kind of insinuating that he doesn't care if it's true, or if it might not be, he understands it's probably not true, insinuating on going down that road. If you're saying this stuff not because it's true, like you're not an artist, like people, what's the quote from V for Vendetta? An artist uses, lies to tell the truth, so to speak. Like he's not an artist, he's a politician. So he's using lies to tell a lie, and so what's the overall point? You're using a lie to tell a lie. The overall point is to keep people in a state where they're easy to manipulate. How can you put someone in a state where they're easy to manipulate? Well, two emotions make you really easy to manipulate: fear and anger. So if you keep people afraid and angry, and another piece about this, by the way, is the way that there's almost a domestic abuse type of approach to the way that they treat their supporters, and that they're constantly trying to isolate their supporters against other Americans and saying, those other people, they don't like you. Those other people are evil. And so when you isolate, this is the reason I call it domestic violence, something you see in domestic violence, and is because what that is the abuser a lot of times tries to isolate the abused so that the abused doesn't feel like they can turn to anyone else. And so it's like, you're stuck with me no matter what I say, no matter what I do, and so forth. So I see all this and I'm just like, so what's the overall goal? Well, the goal is to accumulate power. And I think you can see this from a lot of different angles, in terms of how the Trump campaign, and apparently just there's a strain in the GOP right now that this is about accumulating power, being free from accountability. I mean, the Supreme Court going as far as saying that presidents are immune from, the law and so forth. And so that to me is what I can't escape, is that, okay, well, if this isn't about telling, the reason I say it's a lie to tell a lie is that reports about Springfield are that the immigrants have helped the community and that there have been growing pains, but these are growing pains of a community that is bouncing back, in fact, because of the immigrants. So if the narrative that they're hurting the community isn't true, then you're just trying to create fear and anger, again, so that you can create a group that will follow you, that is easy to manipulate, and that will put up basically with whatever you want to do. Yeah.
And I think, there's something to be said. I want to touch on the last part you said and then go back to some of the things we've been discussing is, when you talk about the whole way that the immigrants were brought to Springfield specifically because the economy was in a ditch, the people of Springfield, Ohio were not going out to apply for the jobs that were, the job vacancies that the small business.
There's like a processing plant there that they were, I think, whatever the company was unable to staff and so forth.
Yeah. So that's why I don't want to stay on this, but I want to say it because we've seen this in American history, which is certain Americans, they're living in a very, what we would, all the rest of us would consider maybe an impoverished community, looks a bit downtrodden, and they're not doing anything about it themselves, right? They're just, taking their government assistance, living their lives, things like that. Then these immigrants come in, and the immigrants have a certain work ethic because they're immigrants, and they just want to show up and work because they're coming from somewhere else that's terrible, and they just appreciate the opportunity. And
by the way, which is something that the country, the United States, has benefited from for decades.
It's what we're founded on.
Like, so that's been one of our secret advantages for a really long time.
But that's why I don't even want to go there, because everyone knows that, even people that want to deny it. So let's just not even try and convince anyone of that, because it's just historical fact. But just the idea that, and if there's 20,000 people of any group, it can 1%, can 200 people maybe be bad apples? Yeah, okay, that's life. But at the end of the day, the small business community, like you said, in Springfield has been thankful, and basically these people are working. And instead of having a community that will come and say, okay, not that they got to go kiss the Haitians behind and say, thanks so much for saving our community, but just accepting, like, okay, these people coming in working, they're starting to revitalize the town. We're starting to get some tax revenue in here. So more businesses may come in to fill the needs and the demand that's now here, because we have a bigger population, so on and so forth. They are driven to saying it's those people's fault, that everything else that's been bad here is because of them. Well, these Haitians only been here for 2-3 years. I bet you Springfield's been dying for 20-30 years for a lot of reasons that doesn't have to do with the Haitians. And so it just reminds me of other times in American past where this is like what JD Vance and Donald Trump doing. The reason why it's so dangerous and inflammatory, and why I don't think we should be sitting there. I think it's a mistake whenever I see on the news people trying to correct these guys. Oh, but they're here legally and all that. These guys don't care about that. The people that are listening and supporting this type of rhetoric don't care that these people are here legally. This is back to a mix of dog whistle and foghorn. The foghorn is what already we've been seeing on TV and what these guys have been saying. The dog whistle is that these are black immigrants. Let's go there. This is racism. It's an easy group to pick on because Haitians are a weak community, meaning they're a very small community in America. So they're preying on the lowest kind of people on the totem pole. There's the stereotypes of voodoo, the whole thing. So it's like these people are savages that are going to come and invade our kind of lily white communities. I mean, this is classic. And what's happening, as we've seen already in Springfield, I just saw this morning the thing from the NAACP there. Black Americans now are getting harassed because the people that want to harass the Haitians can't really tell the difference, because me and you could look Haitian if we're just walking down the street. So again, this is going to spill over into Americans attacking Americans, and we have a vice president and a presidential candidate who are causing this. And it is what it is.
I mean, the thought that you say, as far as like this is a better way to illustrate how this is all about power, because you often say, leadership is important. And so leadership in a situation like that, there is going to be some discomfort when you have new people coming into a community. That's just the way it's going to be. But if the new people coming into the community are helping to revitalize the community, then good leadership, and we've seen this actually on a local level, actually tries to help people become more comfortable with this, try to ease that discomfort, not try to inflame it. The reason you try to inflame it is because you want power. You want to you're not helping the community by inflaming the discomfort that may naturally exist. You are basically consolidating your power. And so we see this manifested in, which I'm going to talk about in a second, is that like these bomb threats and having to close schools, having to close City Hall and all this other type of stuff. That stuff is not making the community better. That's not making things work better. That's not making the community better for anyone. Not the previous residents, not the new residents, anything like that. And so, but I want to say just real quick, like this did remind me of the Stuart Stevens book, It Was All a Lie, that we just discussed a couple weeks ago. And, really what it is that the Trump campaign and Donald Trump was the first Republican politician really to really push the issue online, to just see how much dishonesty the right-wing media ecosystem that Stevens explicitly called machinery for deception. He called the right-wing media ecosystem machinery for deception, tracked it back for decades, how it evolved and everything like that. And this is a former Republican operative doing this. And I think what we're seeing is Donald Trump is trying to push to see the potential of this thing and say, how far can this go? If I say something that I have no truth, no evidence to it or anything like that, and this ecosystem will repeat it over and over and over and over again to the point that we can get people to believe it. How far can I take that? Okay, can I say that a president wasn't born here without any evidence? Check, that works. I can do that. And so what we're seeing is continually escalating. Can I say I won an election that I lost?
Election, yeah.
Like he's continually escalating the lies and dishonesty, really to just push the limit. How far can the machinery for deception, also known as the right wing media ecosystem, how far can I go? How much dishonesty can I do before that starts to bust at the seams? And so it's been so effective, that GOP politicians at this point, they're willing to openly embrace a lie that they'll acknowledge in parts are dishonest or, not true. And they're because the reason they're willing to acknowledge that, because they're comfortable that their constituents either can be convinced that the lies are true. And so, no harm, no foul, apparently, or they have been convinced already that their fellow Americans are so bad that even if their politicians are lying to them to their face and manipulating them to their face, that it's still better than whatever the other side has to offer. And that's where you get into that isolation that I mentioned earlier. So to me, this really is a distillation of what has happened to part of our electorate and part of the leadership apparatus. One of our two political parties that we need two political parties for our system to work right. So it's really the loser here is the American system and the system that our founding fathers set up. And so it is offensive. But I want to ask you about the backlash because, we're going to have to get out of this topic here shortly. But do you think there'll be a backlash to like bomb threats and hospital closings and all the school closings and stuff? Like this is the kind of stuff that, this is like, these are the people that blew up churches, with little girls inside, 50 years ago in this country. Like, do you think there'll be a backlash to this, or do you think that this is, again, we haven't seen the limits of how far, how much people will put up with, if they're in a distinct reality that's been crafted for them?
That's a great question. And time will tell. I would say that this election in November, which is less than 2 months from right now, I think is going to be that barometer. Do the majority of Americans want to keep going this direction and find this kind of, not only the rhetoric, but this the term I've learned recently called stochastic terrorism, which we'll get into after we finish this answer. But do they want that, or do they want the type of whether it's Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, the kind of uplifting, hopeful, America looking forward into the future type of attitude? I mean, this is really in my lifetime the real first time I've been alive to see an American election that doesn't seem to be as much about policy and details like that as it is about just this two different types of directions. Do we want to go the kind of the American optimism way, or do we want to go the American carnage way? And what's
interesting about that, as I think you're right. And I would say that it's not the first time that those issues haven't been like the primary issues, because, there's always an emotional component, but it is the first time where it's kind of like, that's really what it's about. Like, it's not people, there's not even a lot of window dressing on, hey, here's our policies. We have frameworks of policies. And there,
you got concepts. You got concepts of an idea. Yeah.
Concepts of an idea, but it's
for something you've been talking about for a decade.
To the extent that, and even to the extent that in the debate, Donald Trump offered his character witness, the dictator in Hungary, the guy who's like,
but let me
amazing to me. But go ahead.
Let me answer the question, because I think, let me put it this way. I think there's always going to be a part of the American society that doesn't want to accept whatever the mainstream kind of narrative is, right? We saw that during COVID.
Of any society, there's always going to be a portion.
Well, I think just America, we have a culture more of paranoia than others, more so than a lot of at least other Western countries do. I mean, we have the type of paranoia streak you see in, Iran or Afghanistan as relates to certain. Look, what's going on now, and I guess let me not get all over the place. To answer your question, I'm not that confident that a large chunk of Americans, I'm not saying a majority, but at least 30, 40%, if not more, that they may not have enough of this. Because I started thinking about Sandy Hook, remember? I thought that would get enough Americans' attention to want to maybe get creative about how to deal with some of this mass shooting stuff. That didn't. Charlottesville, we saw Nazis with tiki torches talking about Jews will not replace us and saying blood and soil. Half the country acted like there was nothing to see. January 6th, half the country gets convinced there's nothing to see, and that
is it really half the country, or is it just a maybe 40% or 35%, but that they are very involved and very loud? I always wonder. You don't have to answer that.
Could be that, but that 35 to 40 still get another 10 to 15 to be silent, right? So I mean, like half the country is kind of accepting of this.
Effectively, right? Half of the country.
So when you ask the question about how long will the American people put up with this, my concern is that instead of like the answer that I would love to say, which is, yeah, this is it. November is going to be it, blah, blah, blah. I'm more resigned to say these guys keep whittling away at the American kind of psyche. And we seem to be putting up with more and more of this type of attitude because it's not even just the violence and it's the BS. I mean, this stuff is to me lazy. It is like, again, why is Taylor Swift involved in American politics right now? It's not her fault. Is because the former president of the United States keeps poking at her and bringing her up. So this is like we've turned politics and serious things into a reality show.
Yeah, I think that the reason I think it's difficult.
Conclusion.
It was not reached a conclusion, is your point. And we're still going, and I think you're right. Actually, the reason I think that like we're in this situation, and that it's difficult to say at any point that there'll be like a backlash to hey, we got to stop telling lies, or we got to stop, at least amongst the people that are currently accepting of that stuff. We got to stop trying to intimidate or terrorize people. The reason I say is if you look back throughout history, those moments didn't really come a lot of times. A lot of times that it would continue on until something from the outside intervened. Now there were times where societies kind of changed the direction. Even in the United States, you look at post 60s. There was a de-escalation from what things were, from social unrest standpoint, from a discontent standpoint, so forth. So it's possible, but the reason I think it's unlikely here is because it's not it's a multi-part issue. It's not just at what point are we going to have people sit there and say, okay, I just can't, I don't want somebody that's going to lie to me anymore. At the same time, you have the tools and the machinery for supporting liars continue to evolve and improve and get better. So it's like if that stayed static, then I think at a certain point people would get tired of it. But as people, with the threshold for where they might get tired, the machinery of deception continues to improve and continues to get better at deceiving. So it's like this is going to continue to escalate until at some point we're going to be sitting there and it's going to be people openly embrace AI generated stuff that they know isn't true. And they're just say, hey, but this is just what I like. So this is going to be my reality, regardless of the fact it's not true.
Yeah. And you're right. It's a soma coma, right? It's people running into pleasure. And again, that's what I mean by it's kind of lazy. And that's what I mean by the term lazy is takes work and self-reflection and, to grow as a human being and all that. You got to have some adversity. And you're right. Our media ecosystems are just becoming places where we just can lounge around and hear whatever we want to hear and take it as fact and not be challenged so that we can grow intellectually and emotionally as people in a great kind of greater society in terms of population.
Without any struggle, there's no growth. So, your media ecosystems take away all the struggle.
But one of the things I wanted to say, and actually it's just interesting with timing. So I decided it was on Prime. I was watching the movie Scarface, the early 80s movie with Al Pacino that everyone knows. It's an interesting thing because it reminded me, we live in South Florida, James. In 1980 was the Mariel boat lift. And this is why I say the movie, because they show real scenes from it. So everybody, who's got Amazon Prime or can get online and watch Scarface, I recommend you watch the first 10 minutes of the movie. Because that's when Fidel Castro opened up the Cuban prisons and all that stuff and let them out to the United States. And I think it was something like 125,000 Cubans came to South Florida. And, that wasn't easy. There was a lot, if you know the South Florida history, there was some tensions, just like we're talking about tensions in Springfield where, the native Miamians, if you want to call them that, weren't that happy. And there was a term in the 80s and 90s called white flight out of Miami. But if you look at Miami now, built on the back of those Cuban immigrants, Miami is one of the most thriving cities in the world. And so what the other thing that I realized when I'm watching that is these waves of immigrants and migrants have happened before in this country.
Yeah.
But the way that
And we survived.
correct, that's what I'm saying. The way that it is talked about today as if this is the be all and end all for the United States. I mean, this is why to me it's so offensive the way Donald Trump and JD Vance talk. Because this whole thing, like the country's going to be over. We're a third world nation. These guys hate America. And they're causing so much disruption for Americans. This isn't just affecting the Haitian people. And you said this to me. When someone does a bomb threat to Springfield and it shuts down an entire school, the city hall, a hospital, that's white Americans in Springfield also getting affected. When people are harassing black Americans in Springfield, mistaking them for Haitians, that's affecting Americans. So, and one of the people perpetrating these lies is a senator from Ohio. So he's on purposely hurting his own constituents. And I want to read a quote from his interview on Sunday on CNN. It says, if I have to create stories so that American media actually has to pay attention to the suffering of American people, then that's what I'm going to do. That's from a U.S. senator named JD Vance, who's running for vice president.
But the irony is, like you're saying, his lies are causing the suffering of American people.
Yeah, exactly. And
I'll tell you this real quick. I'll let you finish real quick. But because this is like the craziest thing. Like when I'm reading about this and they're like, oh yeah, when the immigrants come, then crime will follow. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's because you guys are committing the crimes. You guys are the ones calling in bomb threats. The immigrants aren't doing that. The immigrants come, and then the people that Vance is talking to apparently start committing crimes. It's like the crimes wouldn't follow if we had leadership that would help people process the change, as opposed to trying to exploit the change to accumulate power on their own.
Correct. And so I want to read one more quote, and then I'm going to get off my high horse, because to me, this is very important to share this. So Donald Trump was quoted on Sunday. I saw him at a speech, and so I know he said this, and he says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit because it was a long diatribe, but and illegal Haitian migrants came in, taking over such a beautiful place, talking about Springfield. You have this beautiful place called Springfield. All of a sudden, you have 20,000 illegals in your community, and no one knows where they came from, which is interesting. They came from Haiti. I'm angry about young American girls being raped and sodomized and murdered by savage criminal aliens. That was a former American president who's asking for the job again. And that to me that's now we're at the level of pogroms in Eastern Europe in the late 1800s, early 1900s with the blood libels, when they said that Jews were kidnapping young kids and using their blood to put on the door for Passover, and they will go burn a whole Jewish town because of those lies. Or lynch mobs in the late 1800s, early 20th century in America, when some publication would say Negro rapes white woman, and a mob would go into the black section of town, take 10 black guys out of their house and hang them from a tree after beating the hell out of them. Like, this is serious stuff. We have a leader in this country that just said that he's angry about young American girls being raped and sodomized and murdered by savage criminal aliens. With no evidence of that, think about this. We have Ring cameras and cell phone cameras in the United States. This thing's been going around for a couple of weeks. I haven't seen one video of a Haitian person with a pet. I mean, this is really, and this is what I'm saying, James. I want to ask the people that consume this willingly and really ask them to pause and ask them, why are they so willing to want to follow this and consume it? Because like you and I just said, go look at the Mariel boat lift. We've been through this before. 20,000 Haitians, not going to hurt 300 million Americans.
But that's
it's so sad.
Of you can't ask them because they're in a contained media ecosystem where they get whatever they get that's going to keep them on this string, so that they can. So
it's just sad,
and so that's the concern. Really, is that unless you can break them out of this ecosystem and actually show them things that are really going on, and there have been studies about this. I remember the study we talked about it, in passing at one point, where they took a certain number of Fox News viewers, just had them watch CNN for 4 weeks instead of Fox, and they didn't change from their political leanings, but the things that they believed, the reality that they believed was real, changed and they stopped believing things like the big lie, and they stopped believing all these false things that are propagated and that people are immersed in if they're in these alternate realities. And so, I mean, I think that is, as long as that exists, and I don't know how you necessarily fix that. I have some ideas, but this isn't the show for that. But as long as that exists, it seems like this is the direction it's going to go. And I really want to, now we'll close it up, but I do want to echo your point that I don't understand the why these folks think America, the country, and also the American system is so weak and fragile. Like, it's in their mind, any change will destroy America. And it's like, America's been here for a while. The only people that are trying to destroy the America that the founding fathers put together are the people that are trying to disenfranchise voters, or trying to turn off immigration, or send the military around in the country to start rounding up people. Like, that's the stuff that's going to destroy America, not people coming in. People have been immigrating into America for the whole time. The world didn't end when Reagan gave amnesty to 4 million or whatever it was illegal immigrants. And so, like you said, after the stuff in Miami, like, there have been this stuff going on the whole time. We had boats and boats of people coming for decades. Again, that stuff typically has strengthened America, not made it weak, not ended it. So that they have such a negative view of America and of America's own strength and power, in my view, makes them unfit to lead a nation. If you think a nation is weak and can't stand on its own 2 feet, you're not the person that should be leading it. If you have a football coach that think the team is garbage, he's not going to be a good coach for the football team. You need somebody that sees the possibilities of what the team can accomplish, has the vision, and can put that in place. You have people that think nothing's going to work, then guess what? Nothing's going to work. So, I mean, that say what?
They have a concept of a vision, apparently.
Yeah, but that's all negative. So, but no, I think we can close up this topic from here. Check out.
No, but yeah, I just want to end with this. That this is we're living through this. James, this is like George Wallace. This is Strom Thurmond saying segregation now, segregation forever in 1948. First time in our life we're living through this.
Yeah. Yep. So, all right, but no, we appreciate everybody for joining us on this part. Please join us on the other part for this show for this week, and we'll talk to you then.